Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners for January 8th, 2019. If you would, please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. In terms of the agenda, like to suggest a change because I know our fire folks are on a tight time schedule, and we will move public comments since the public comments pertain to the Waxhaw Marvin Road to after the presentation on the fire district funding, so Chief Sharp can hear the entire presentation. So with that slight modification, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
With that, it's just a fire presentation. We will entertain Mr. Michael James, from the Assistant to the County Manager, to present the Fire Service District Funding Study. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, good evening.
I think the last time I saw you was dancing in the clover.
I believe that was.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll do a lot less.
And that worked well for both of us, didn't it?
It was fun. It was fun. Well, good evening again, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about our fire funding study. The county's been working on this project for a little over a year now, and this is something that's been ongoing as far as discussion for much longer than that. So we're excited to bring it to you. The board had asked that we go to all of our municipalities and have this conversation. Go through the presentations. This is about my 11th or 12th one so far, so it's a little like Groundhog's Day. But I hope everybody gets a lot of information out of this, and any questions that y'all may have, please feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer those as best I can. So what we'll go through, I want to make sure everybody understands what the objective of the study was this past year, what was the rationale behind it, why the commissioners and staff moved forward with this study. We'll go through how fire is currently funded in Union County. Make sure everyone understands the methodology used now. That'll be a good foundation to understand how we're looking to move forward. Next, we'll go through some of the alternative funding strategies that are before the board right now. So in working with consultant and working with staff, we presented several options to the board as alternative means to fund fire. So we'll walk through each of those. And in the end, what we would like for each governing body to do in the county is to provide us a letter of support or resolution or a letter through the town manager, just stating an option that the town council feels is appropriate for the residents of Waxhaw, and something that you all feel you could give a note to the Board of Commissioners that is something that you approve of as an option is the ultimate goal. So to begin with, on the objective of the study, again, we released an RFP towards the end of 2017 to really just find a consultant who looked at fire funding from an economic standpoint. We just did an economic analysis on how we fund it. We did not evaluate any station locations, staffing, operational things like that. We just looked at if everything was the same as it is today, what would be an alternative way to fund this that works better long term. So the overall goal, we wanted to make sure that we had equity in how we assess fire taxes or fire fees, and we wanted to make sure that we had something that is sustainable and something that works long term. We all know Union County is growing and changing, and density is changing, and so we want to make sure that we have a uniform funding strategy across the county that can adapt to those changing environments as development comes. So through this process, we had several stakeholder meetings. We've met with the fire chiefs, I believe 2 or 3 times to allow them to give input to the process, to help guide the study. Had several good conversations with them, and they've been wonderful to work with, and Chief Sharp was a great assistance in that as well, so I appreciate his time. And then we had several meetings with the Board of County Commissioners to also give their input, give their guidance to the consultant and to staff to make sure that we were headed down the right road. So some of the early direction that we received, this doesn't pertain to Waxhaw specifically, but we do have 12 of our fire districts that are funded through fire fees. We know that that model lacks some sustainability, and we wanted to look at options to replace that model. We wanted to also work with tax to make sure that we are collecting all the appropriate fire fees and fire taxes in our fire service districts. We worked with tax to make sure that we were appropriately assessing properties in the county, and we did that. And lastly, we wanted to make sure, again, that we're meeting our future demands. We know that a lot of our fire departments are struggling to get volunteers nowadays, as probably any organization is to get volunteers in today's society. It's a little tougher to do. Also, the cost of fire services is continuing to increase, and you'll see a slide later in the presentation. From 2010 to now, it's been a significant increase in the cost of providing the service. As equipment goes up, personnel costs go up. We've seen that across the county, and again, changes in density. As that occurs in our municipalities in our county, we need to make sure that we have a model that it works and allows us to be flexible in meeting the needs of the fire departments. So how we're currently funded today, you'll see on the right-hand side is our 17 fire departments that serve our 17 fire service districts. 5 of our volunteer fire departments are funded through a local fire tax. So that fire service district has a tax rate that the Board of Commissioners approves every budget year to set that tax rate to meet the budget requirements that the fire department has. The 12 remaining districts have a fire fee model. And that fire fee model is local legislation that Union County has. It's us and Brunswick County are the only 2 counties in North Carolina that still have a fire fee methodology in place. So that the county commissioners have no control to raise the fire fee. That has to come from Raleigh. They have to approve that. So what you'll see in subsequent slides is we've had to, as that cap has not raised enough money in some of our fee districts, we've had to subsidize through that countywide fire tax to make sure they have the money they need to operate, and that's where most of the countywide fire tax goes to. So 16% of the fire protection square mileage in the county is within municipal boundaries. That is a little unique as far as nearly 20% of what we serve is in municipalities. A lot of counties, municipalities have their own fire departments, or the county will contract with that municipal fire department to serve unincorporated county. City of Monroe and the town of Weddington are only 2 that have fire protection services that they procure on their own. Obviously, Monroe is a municipal fire department, and the town of Weddington contracts with Wesley Chapel to provide their services. So I spoke of the increase earlier. So as you'll see, our current budget this year was a little over $13.5 million, and that is an increase of 50% since 2009, just to give the board or the council an idea as to how much that has increased over the past few years. So here's a budget snapshot that shows FY19 fire funding. You'll see the fire departments listed, the countywide fire tax, which is at 0.0103, which again is assessed countywide. The next column is the $100 fire fee, or the tax rate per or for each taxing district. In the operating appropriations column, that is the budget request that the fire department had to the county commissioners for this past fiscal year. So that's their operating budget. In yellow are revenue sources, and there's only a few revenue sources that we have. In the fire department revenue column, that could be grant money, that could be fundraisers that a fire department does. That makes up that column. Next to that is the countywide fire tax revenue, which is again is at 1.03 cent. And you can see that that largely goes to all of our fee districts who, through the fee model, cannot raise the money they need to be able to provide for fire protection in that district. And the last little line, that kind of goes towards countywide costs, and what that is, that's the radio program that the county manages for their fire departments to provide funding for that. Next column is the fee and tax revenue. Sales tax column is the next. That goes to our fire tax districts. So our fire tax districts are eligible to receive some sales tax. We did want to make a note that the question was asked during a community forum that we had, was if we had 12 additional fire tax districts in the county, would that affect municipalities' sales tax revenue? We just want to make it clear that the sales tax that the fire departments receive come from the county's allocation of sales tax, not the municipalities. So you'll see no budgetary impact from that standpoint. Yes, sir.
Quick question. If a municipality contributes to their fire district, where's that money reflected in here? That would most likely be in the fire department revenue if they reported that to us. I would assume so. Is that missing from your line item? I'm assuming. No, I'm just asking the question. Is that Chief Sharp?
No, for us, we submit a separate budget to y'all for projects, and that isn't reflected up there at all.
Okay.
So the next few slides, we just wanted to give the council an idea of kind of what the commissioners are looking at, what our consultant was looking at. So in part of the evaluation that we did, we wanted to make a note that the fire departments are much more than simply fire protection. Obviously, that's a big part of what they do, but they really are a life safety service for the county. They're first responders in wrecks and accidents that may happen. They're usually the first ones on the scene, and they do a great job at that. So 80% of what they do is really non-fire related. It is a public safety service that they provide here in Union County. And looking at what the commissioners are facing, when you look countywide, we have very different districts when you look from west to east. So Wesley Chapel, for example, has about $5 billion worth of taxable value within that fire service district. And then you take some of our districts down east, they're looking at $126 million. So that's the kind of balance we're trying to face and when we're looking at getting the revenue that we need and funding fire protection here in the county. Agricultural land, same instance. In a lot of our fire service districts, there's a lot of agricultural land. They are subject to the farm value deferment program, so they only pay on a small percentage of the value of the land. So when you look at some of our more rural districts, they are facing that as an obstacle to make sure they get the revenues they need when they have a lot of tax-deferred land in their fire service district. Again, just a note for the council to kind of see globally what the board is looking at. So here's a slide. When we were looking at Brunswick County, we wanted to do some analysis of how we compare to them. And one of the things about Union County is that the majority of our population are within our taxing districts in the city of Monroe. But most of the land area is actually in our fire fee district. So they have a lot of square mileage to cover, but a lot less density. So that just kind of speaks back to their issue in trying to fund fire services through that fire fee model. Fee districts can work if you have a lot of density. If you don't have a lot of density, it makes it a little more difficult to raise the revenue that you need to operate. So here's a look at the sales tax allocations. As I mentioned, each fire department, if they are a taxing district, would receive a portion of the county's sales tax as part of their revenue. So we ran the analysis that the council could see in looking at a self-funding district model, which is what you all will receive now. We're looking at the estimate a little over $300,000 that the Waxhaw Fire Service District would receive. And then it kind of decreases as any countywide subsidy goes into play, but you'll see the sales tax revenue is a good bit of money going into our fire service districts. Yes, sir.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure. Has any analysis been done of the level of service required for the high-density fire tax district versus the low-density land area and where we are today and how that factors into what the ultimate cost would be?
Not particularly, no. What we were looking at was really if everything was to stay the same.
Okay.
If we could pursue a funding model that can be adjustable, can be flexible, I think we can naturally go into that conversation of looking strategically at the county as far as some of the operational questions that we have, planning for density and things like that. But this is just strictly looking at
strictly
the
funding.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Thank you.
So some of the early takeaways, so obviously you've seen our two different funding models that we have with the tax and the fee. Again, the fee model is controlled by the General Assembly, and the majority of the countywide fire tax goes to subsidize our fire fee districts who are kind of handicapped by that fire fee model and the fact that the cap can't raise the money or the fire fee doesn't raise the money they need.
Since the fire fee is controlled by the legislature, but it's a local legislation, have the county commissioners considered any new local legislation to propose to them?
That is one of the options on the table.
Okay.
That they haven't obviously decided whether they're going to go that route or not, but it is doable. We would just have to draft some legislation and get it to Raleigh if the board wants to move that way.
Okay. I'd mention it because this is the year to do it.
Yeah, that's probably right. So again, here are the funding options we're going to go through and to show the council. Self-funding tax district was essentially what Waxhaw district has now. We did have a 6th district option, which was a consolidation of all of our fire fee districts into one taxing district. The board did take that off the table at our last presentation to them. So that is no longer an option. Another option is the countywide fire tax, which is they would zero out any local district tax and we just have one countywide tax to fund fire protection services in the county. Another option we looked at is something that the chiefs had talked about several years ago, is that each fire department would be provided some allotment of money as a baseline, and then the district within itself would raise the additional revenue above that. So it's pretty much an 80-20 model, 70-30, whatever the board chose to do, that the county would provide them a basic allotment. And lastly, which really doesn't apply to Waxhaw, but that is the Brunswick model is what we call it, which is a local legislation to increase the fire fees. Just to give some idea what's built into it, since Monroe and since Weddington already provide for fire protection services on their own, we did recommend that to the board that we just reimburse them if there is a countywide fire tax in any model that they choose. We would reimburse them since they're essentially outside of our system right now. They kind of manage that on their own. Looking at the taxing models, we're assuming that the board and the towns that are in fee districts agree to become fire service tax districts. Those municipalities have to agree by resolution to allow the county to collect fire service tax in their municipal boundaries. So that's another step we'd have to go through. Let me see, all of the fire district revenue does include real property, personal property, motor vehicle tax, sales tax. All of those revenue sources go into the calculations. And again, all the sales tax will be shared among all taxing districts as directed by law. So here is the self-funding tax district model using the analysis that we did with Stantec. And you'll see Waxhaw's proposed tax rate. Again, these are last budget year numbers, would be about 5.32 under this model. And there would be no countywide fire service tax if we had all self-funding tax districts across the county. That tax rate would be removed. And obviously some of the attributes of it, it is totally dependent and reflective on the density of the district. That will be reflected in what that tax rate needs to be to fund fire protection services, since there's no longer any kind of subsidy from the county under this model. Here's the self-funding plus a 20% subsidy. We chose a 20% option because currently the countywide tax does pay countywide 20% of the whole entire cost to fund fire protection services. So we just chose that as a ballpark figure, that each fire department would receive 20% of their budget from a countywide tax. So even the current taxing districts, everybody would receive 20% of that budget from the countywide fire tax, and the 80% of the budget that they need would come from a district tax itself. So looking at Waxhaw at the bottom, their local district tax would be 4.27, and then the county would be responsible either within our current tax rate, or if the tax rate needed to be changed, we'd be responsible for the other 20% in the county. Here is the countywide fire service tax model. So again, this is you would get rid of all local district taxes, and we would just have a countywide fire tax to fund fire protection service in the county, and that would be 0.0666 cent. And here's where Monroe Weddington obviously be reimbursed under this model and the 20% subsidy model. Again, this doesn't apply to y'all. This is more just informational purposes. This is the Brunswick model. If anybody's interested in learning about that, it's an interesting system that they do, but their fees are much more complex, using square footage, using acreage amounts. They've created that tier model, I think, probably 10 years ago, and recently went back and doubled it, but that's the model that they use, which gives them more flexibility, gives them more revenue than our flat $100 rate, regardless of the property characteristic itself. And again, this is just a little bit of information on the Brunswick model, looking at our fee districts, how much of the max rate they would need. And again, that just pertains to our fee districts. Lastly, we had asked the fire chiefs, we've had a conversation with them, and we've passed on their comments to the Board of County Commissioners. But I wanted to give them the opportunity, in their words, to kind of share their opinion of why they feel a particular funding model makes sense. So we just asked them two simple questions. Which of the models do you think best meets your needs, and why is that? And so we had pretty good response from all our volunteer fire departments, and again, I appreciate their effort in working with us. So overall, none of the fire departments thought continuing the fee model made sense to them. They wanted to move to some form of a taxing model, either a countywide, which was Fairview and Griffith Road. Most of them shows either a self-funding or a self-funding plus a subsidy model. So we shared this with the board just to give them information directly from the fire chief, since they're on the front lines dealing with this, that they can provide directly their input to the board. And again, 13 of the 15 did show their preference of a fire tax model. And again, nobody wanted to continue a fire fee district or move forward with a sixth fire fee or fire tax district option. So just to wrap up, some of the long-term goals, we know that the question was raised that what if a municipality wanted to opt out of the county system, which is totally within the purview of a town to do. We would just like to work with any of our municipalities who are potentially considering that. We really see it as a partnership. We need to make sure that our residents are served and served appropriately, and fire protection is a very important service in the county. So we see it much more as a partnership to make sure that we can plan long-term for the county and that unincorporated residents are getting service that they need, and so are our municipal residents as well. And we can be flexible with the model. You know, if we need to make any changes to fire service district boundaries, there's a process to do that. And we would just ask to work with our municipalities as they go through those discussions to be part of that conversation. So, Mayor, I hope that wasn't too entirely long, but
Great.
I appreciate y'all's time. And again, just to wrap up, I just would appreciate the council's feedback. It doesn't have to be tonight, obviously, but sometime within the next month, to kind of let us know which option you think is appropriate for you all, that you feel you could support, and I could share that with the commissioners. We're going to have a work session with them in March to kind of bring this whole roadshow back to them and that feedback that we received from the community to allow them to make a decision on our next step.
Questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you all.
Lots of good stuff there. Okay, now, next up, we will open it up to public comments pertaining to items on the agenda. We have one individual, Candace DeFinis.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody had a great holiday. My name is Candace DeFinis. I live at 8313 Willow Branch Drive in Waxhaw. And my questions and comments are really associated to the Waxhaw-Marvin Road Corridor Study. Looking at the study on page 19, there is a map, and the map indicates that some of the areas in maroon are Carolina Thread Trail paths. Looking at this map, I know of two to be Carolina Thread Trail and already been associated to the Thread Trail, which is Millbridge and Prescott. However, two other neighborhoods are not currently part of the Thread Trail, and those neighborhoods are Curitan and Barrington. And those neighborhoods own their trails, maintain and insure their trails. So my questions were really surrounding why they would be represented on the map and on the plan. Having spoken to a representative from the Barrington HOA as well as the Curitan HOA this evening, my understanding is that neither one of these neighborhoods has been approached about an agreement to hand these trails or enter into an agreement with the town. So I was just really trying to understand why it would be represented on the study when no said agreement has been discussed or in place. As a resident of Curitan, and being a previous person from the HOA board in Curitan, I know that we take pride in the maintenance, the insurance, and the care of our trail system for our residents. So just wanted to have a clear understanding if there was going to be a change, why wasn't it represented as a change versus showing and being treated on this map as if it was already agreed to. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We'll have the question looked into. Okay. Our item of business tonight, it's old business Waxhaw-Marvin Corridor Study. Matt Hubert, Town Engineer.
So I'm pleased to present the Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor study. We previously presented this to the Planning Board at the December 17th meeting, and so they have provided a positive recommendation, and we brought it forward for you all to hear and provide comment, and hopefully make a recommendation to adopt it. So just to provide...
Would you like to introduce your
absolutely.
individual to the left?
I'll get to that. I got him included, but this is Brady.
Brady Finkley with Kinley Horn, and so we were contracted with the town to perform the study.
So just a brief background to get everybody up to speed, and then we can get into the content. The purpose of the study was to enable us to be more proactive in making planning decisions to help mitigate issues that we're having in this corridor before they happen. It was completed in cooperation with the CRTPO and an 80-20 matching grant totaling $62,500, $12,500 of which were town local funds. Again, the expectation is that traffic in this corridor is going to increase due to development and the needs for alternatives to NC-16 as that continues to develop. And also to add other forms of mobility along the corridor that have been an expectation, I think, of residents, and do it in a safe and economical process. Again, this Kinley Horn was selected as the firm to complete the study. That's where Brady's here on their behalf. Basically, they laid out 3 phases in their program. Begin with phase 1 to identify the existing conditions, data collection, engage the public. Move on to phase 2 where they evaluate that data, compare recommendations and alternatives, and then finally move into phase 3 where we are with documenting in a final report, communicating it out to the public and the board and other entities as necessary. So the guiding principles, there was a vision statement created that the road will promote a safe, efficient, and multimodal travel options to connect the people to the places they want to go. And then eventually over time the corridor can advance broader community initiatives related to mobility, economic vitality, parks and rec, open space and infrastructure. Those visions are met through various goals: connectivity, safety, efficiency, multi-modes, integrate them with other solutions, and finally add some character specific to Waxhaw in the process. So when we really delve down into that, the major priorities that are really reflected in the content are the safety, and that's reflected in the speeds on the corridor, the sight distance issues, and certainly that ties into the intersections that are key within this corridor. And then secondary become walkability initiatives and finally bikeability initiatives. So when we get down to the core of what the study wants to provide, this is the typical section that is recommended. And basically it's a 3-lane section where you have 2 through lanes in the other direction, and then you have a center turn lane that allows for turning movements to be out of the through traffic. We maintain the ditch section, and then on either side, you get a 5-foot sidewalk and then a 10-foot multi-use path. What this does, if you compare it to the existing 60-foot right-of-way, is it's going to require 16 feet of additional right-of-way on either side for a total of 92 feet. And this is really the bare minimum we think we can get away with to provide what the goals were and not increase costs and impacts. As you see, when we get to the overlay, there are already existing developments, single-family homes that were pre-development, and then some other development room in the corridor. And specifically, you know, the option of including bike lanes on the travel way was investigated. It was kind of identified that if we're talking about increasing your mobility options and safety in this corridor, it's a residential use. I think primarily we want to see that families can use this path to bring their kids along on their bikes and enjoy it, and not necessarily add the cost of 10 feet of additional paved lane and then 10 feet of additional right-of-way, that if you're trying to accommodate road bicycling would additionally impact here. And the trade-off is that with the center lane, you can still have access around when conditions permit to get around the road cyclists, but you're not going to want the families to be biking on the road, and the road bikers are not going to use the 10-foot path. And so this is a concession that's made in the interests of economy and the right-of-way impact. Again, I think in the study, we were leaning toward the multi-use path being on the east side. I'm not so sure that's really well vetted, so I think we're going to very shortly engage in a feasibility study to determine what impacts either side have, so that as we've got some things currently programmed, we can really define which side that really should start occurring on. The park's on the west side. A lot of things were involved, so in the scope of this study, it wasn't really determined. It was just kind of understood there will be a path on one side or the other.
Just a comment or a suggestion. So I know early on when we originally looked at this, we approached Marvin, and they couldn't at that time focus on this because they were focusing on the roundabouts and they had other transportation issues. And we also know how that is fundamentally changing how transportation is happening up at that end. But if we're talking about a feasibility study with the right-of-way, this covers Marvin as you get past Gray Byram. Would we include them in that discussion, or are we just doing this?
I wouldn't say we're far enough along to preclude it,
Okay.
but in my conceptualizing how this would play out, I haven't kind of incorporated it, so
Okay.
to speak. I think I've got enough going on just in the town limits to make it complicated enough in terms
That
of...
I understand, but as you get right past Gray Byram, even though this corridor study went to Bonds Grove, right, when you get to Valhalla, you're starting to get into, or even on the other side, you're starting to get into Marvin town limits and then county,
Sure.
et cetera.
Right.
And I know we ran into that same thing with Highway 16, and we had to get people together.
Right.
Is that kind of the thought process that ultimately we'd have to get to?
It is now, right? Again, we're doing a lot on the fly, lots going on in a short span of time.
Right, okay.
And so I don't...
I just want to put it out there. I know this is just a guidance document. I get that.
Sure.
And I would add too that I think kind of what you're getting to is that any kind of roadway project is a linear project, and drivers don't really see the municipal lines. So when you're they all need to connect. And so if we're going to be broaching the Marvin area and getting outside or even close to municipal lines, then we'd want to reach out to them. One, with what our recommendation here is, and then two, going towards that feasibility study and determining where those limits would be.
So here's a quick kind of visual of what it would look like with your 3 lanes, ditch section, green space, and then sidewalk one side, multi-use path on the other. And here is the overlay in general. Not great scaling, but you'll be able to see, and I think in the reports as well, exactly what this kind of does to improve the corridor. And then this provides the cross-section. It shows the right-of-way implications, identifies the intersection improvements, and then the zones of crosswalks, which we'll get into. So then when we really delve down into the intersection impacts, the proposed designs, if we start at the northmost intersection, Bonds Grove Church Road, one of the things that was looked at was a roundabout. And it makes sense in a lot of areas, but it just didn't make sense in this location because all the AM and PM movements are in a particular direction, and Bonds Grove Church Road will kind of be left stagnant because there's not enough brakes in the action in your north and south directions to really let that traffic enter. And so stop control and roundabouts were reviewed and found not to provide really a level of service improvement. So a traditional stoplight is recommended here. They will recommend realigning the intersection to improve the visibility issues, and then, of course, the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations would be included as well. The estimated project cost for just this intersection is $1.6 million. So if you continue further south, next is Gray Byram, same conditions here.
And that's a good example where we'd have to work with the county and the municipality of Marvin, because that does not sit within Waxhaw's town limits. So that's
Right.
not something that
Sure.
we would be expending dollars on.
Yeah, and I think across the board, because it's a DOT road and because of the expenses we're looking at, I don't know that really much of these can be considered town-specific funded projects. We're looking throughout this document to find wherever source we can to support what we're trying to accomplish in,
Yep.
in the purposes of safety and effective transportation. So to that point, again, Gray Byram mirrors Bonds Grove Church. A roundabout really doesn't solve the issues of trying to get this intersection flowing better, and so a stoplight control is recommended. This doesn't necessarily have to be realigned, just add additional laneage for turning movements, and then the bike and ped improvements. And this one, because there's no realignment, is a value at $1.2 million. Then we get to Kensington Drive. We're currently in one level of improvement there right now, where mitigations for the TIA from Millbridge, Curtin, St. Matthews are all taking place in the coming months to provide additional laneage, move the stoplights back. But projecting out to 2040 volumes, we see a need to add even additional turn lanes and through lanes at this intersection. It's a significant increase, and so the estimated cost here is $4 million at this point. Again, something I don't think the town can really take down on its own, but the numbers are now out there for everyone to see and contemplate. And then finally, Pine Oak intersection doesn't have the volumes, so it doesn't need to be improved in terms of traffic lights or roundabouts, but it does have a sight distance issue. It comes in at a terrible skew. And so the recommendation there is to realign it for safety purposes, have that southbound left turn lane provided to keep your through movements unencumbered, and this is a relative bargain at $400,000, and certainly something we could take in maybe at a local level if need be. So when you get past the intersections, then we get to the pedestrian crossing initiatives, and there are a number of sites where crossings are certainly going to be recommended, but we have to balance the need of vehicular progression with pedestrian movements, and so I think every development would want its own crossing, and that's just simply not really feasible. So we're dealing with a DOT road. We're going to have to follow their warrant process. And so specific guidance isn't really within the scope of this, but it does lay out some of the guidelines and what we'd have to do to line up to then begin getting those authorized. But what we're looking at here is a good example where a median refuge certainly is nice, better signage, lighting, and then some sort of interactive can be considered. Again, you got to have your traffic volumes, you got to have ped counts to back all of that up. And right now, we don't have really anywhere to start to get those because not much is out there to engender it. So again, the actual placement and the type of crosswalk will be subject to a separate study at the time when these are really contemplated.
A logical place might be where the thread trails.
Sure, thread trails. The bridge is a great means. If we can get a crossing under it, then you avoid conflicting pedestrian and vehicle. And so those kinds of things are going to be foremost in our minds. How do we eliminate the conflict, if at all? And then, if we can't, what mechanisms would be in place to make them as safe as possible? So then the next steps would be, again, this really provides the foundation for all of our planning guidance. And so we would want to, adopt the study locally and then promote the study interlocally with the CRTPO, neighboring towns, NCDOT, and the county, get their feedback and get their buy-in and make them aware so that as they have planning efforts that may overlap, they already have the blueprint of what our expectations are. Again, we've seen some of the costs are high, and we're going to need funding from the state, maybe through the CRTPO, county, wherever we can find initiatives that meet these goals will certainly be key to bring this up and in the conversation. Again, we can use this to help establish design themes. We already have, I think, a pretty successful wayfinding program. We would expand that to this corridor as well. And then when we talk about some of the specific next steps, the bridges being planned for replacement in Waxhaw Marvin Road, just south of Kensington. Right now, they are not considering anything beyond a 2-lane section, and they've said they'll provide room for a sidewalk and a multi-use path, but they're not planning to build it yet. And so I want to get this adopted as quickly as possible so we can present this to them in the planning stage and say, look, this is our goal moving forward, and we really want to seriously consider an additional lane, having those improvements already planned, and maybe a greenway crossing underneath, so that our goals that are clarified here can be dealt with at a planning stage and not before it's too late. And that goes with the sidewalks as well. Subdivisions that are not built yet, we would use this document in an overlay methodology to say, this is our expectation. If you're a CUP or whatnot, these are going to be expectations to approval. Again, to conclude, the staff supports the study as presented. It meets the goals and the vision set forth. And the initial scope and is invaluable for imminently and in the future to help guide our decisions. What I didn't include in the program, again, was that the planning board has already heard and seen the report, and they've provided a positive recommendation as well. So at that point, I'll open up to questions.
Commissioner Burrow.
Okay. Excuse me, my voice is halfway here. Back in 2014 and 15, when we were working on the comprehensive plan, your department really didn't know where West Waxhaw Parkway was going to go. Seeing this, seeing the work that you've put forward on Providence Road and this, I feel very, very confident that we're moving into the future the way we should. Planning ahead. There was nothing in this report that I would take exception to, except to say, job well done, please keep it up, and keep talking to all the other municipalities, and let's go forward. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes, I have a few questions. Let me start with the plan, as you have sent it to us, describes Waxhaw Marvin as a, quote, suburban minor arterial. Now, when I sit in the CRTPO, they don't talk about this road as minor. They talk about this as the next major north-south corridor and the next 16 and the next major roadway in our area. So I'm wondering if we're going far enough when we plan for the traffic to come. Your report talks about Union County having a 12.6% growth rate. That's Union County. But Western Union County, from what they tell us at CRTPO, has a 60% growth rate. So if we're planning for 12 and 60 is what we are getting, I'm not sure if the plan goes far enough. I'm concerned if, when we talk about looking out to 2040, is 1 lane each way and a turn lane enough? Is that going to accommodate the growth that we're already seeing and the growth that's coming? Or are we going to have this plan for this cross-section and then have to change and add more right-of-way and more room for more lanes later on? And if we are asking for money from DOT, which we certainly should be since this is their road, we need to really understand what our cross-section is going to be, I think. And I feel like we've spent much more time talking about the cross-section for 16 than we have on this report. So my concerns are just if this report goes far enough. It doesn't contain a funding model, which to me, any good plan of action has to have the how do we fund it portion.
Right. And so, I mean, they're good points. I think generally, we've already got our work cut out for us in kind of waiting for 16 to get here. I think the volumes have been generated and they're based on good data. It's an intermediate step. I think ultimately we're going to find ourselves in a 16 type of situation, but because it's purely residential, we're not getting the commercial kind of activity that 16 brings, and it certainly is going to grow into a parallel to 16, but if we were to say put that out, then it almost becomes unobtainable in terms of trying to get that to happen here. This is, I think, a much more manageable plan where we're piecemealing what we need when we need it instead of waiting and pushing it back so far that it can't be done and the status quo doesn't get it. And I think Brady can certainly help speak to the volume generations and why they said what they wanted.
Yeah, and to start, so with the minor arterial discussion, so that's not to subjectively say that this is a minor road. I think the town is looking at this as an important issue by taking on and acquiring this grant to put this plan together. The minor arterial is actually a functional classification that the state provides and as well as the MPO provides. So that's just the term that they use for this specific road right now. And then in terms of volumes, so what we did was we took the regional model that is based off of all the plan, basically zoning along this area. In addition to, we've helped the town do multiple traffic studies around the town, and so we have really good data for all the developments that are coming forward that we know of right now. And so we took both of those and applied those to existing counts and then increased them up to 2040. So we had data from the regional model, which can sometimes maybe not predict, especially for a town like Waxhaw, and we saw this a number of years ago when we looked at the Kensington and Cuthbertson intersection as well. But because of that, we also took the development specifically that we knew of and added that as well to come up with the volumes that we analyzed for this analysis.
So you're confident that these are pretty accurate for
Right now, and every time you do a traffic analysis, it's always a snapshot in time. So it's the best data and information we have right now. Of course, if you come out and you put, a Curitan, retail development over on Waxhaw Marvin, things will change, and then they'll have to do a traffic study, and then we can look at maybe they need to have a couple different or 2 through lanes along the section, wherever that may go. But right now, we don't see that happening. We haven't heard of anything. And so we base it all off the information that we have right now at hand.
What about containing a funding model within the plan before we approve the plan? What about that aspect?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think what we have to clarify is where we are in the process. Before CRTPO or anybody moves ahead, you have to have some form of recommended plan, and that's before they will entertain any discussion of eligibility for DA funds or making Waxhaw Marvin accessible to the STI program, as my understanding.
Correct.
Right now, that road is viewed as NCDOT owned and will repave it every 10 years or every 15, and that's how they look at it. What this is doing is saying, this is, as it's said in here, is guidance. Now we force guidance to CRTPO, to us, to the adjoining communities, and say, this is what's going to happen, and now we have to go forward and not only go for a funding model, but I also saw in there some policy decisions we have to make, and bring those to the board, right? I mean, this is the beginning step in a you got a lot of work ahead of you. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And you're going to be busy.
Because it puts it all in one place.
Yeah.
And the data's in the appendix, so we'll be able to refer to all this information in one spot. And anytime anything comes along, we'll just be able to pull this out and say, hey, this is why.
It probably will change.
And it will change, and that's we tried to make it sort of flexible because it will change. It's a guiding document, and the way the mayor referred to as the STI, the way it works is it looks at existing volumes. There's not enough existing volume there right now to really create a project to fund this entire project. So realistically, what's probably going to happen is there will be independent small projects within this whole corridor that will come out of this. And so what our goal was, working with the town, was like those 4 intersections we talked about, we have them on 2 pages. We have all the information that you would need right now, that if some kind of DA funding or some kind of small funding pocket came out of maybe the MPO, then we already have it there. So a lot of times when they say, okay, we have a funding source, provide provide potential projects, we have to then actually go out and pick up data and run analysis and everything else. The goal is to have everything there so we can say, here it is, it's been adopted by the town, and here's our projects. But then also development projects could potentially help fund some of this as they pop up along the corridor. So I think there's things to be thought through.
Commissioner Burns?
You answered most of my questions, but I know there's $7.2 million just with these 4 issues here, and so the expectation is for this to be outside funding rather than town funding, correct? For this plan.
That's part of the conversation, right? I mean, going forward, we know we want these things, and so how do we get them, and in what time frame does that look like? And I will say the CRTPO is looking to tighten their application guidelines so that this kind of stuff is a requirement. And if you don't already have it planned, they're not even going to accept it.
Yeah, and let's also not fool ourselves. Where DOT is going with DA funds is you have to pay to play. So you do have to do some matching portion. It's not necessarily 50%, but if it's 7 or 8 million, the town's going to have to match a portion of that, maybe 25%, whatever. That's just, otherwise you're not going to get
and the higher up you
match,
the more reliable you are to get that.
They're trying to get more done.
Right. And I will speak to Candace's concern as far as the thread trail is included in here. If there's any inaccuracies, we'll certainly go back and edit the document to ensure that it doesn't misrepresent what's occurring and the intent.
Yeah, and to clarify on that, I'm glad you brought it up to clarify, but nothing's changing with the Carolina Thread Trail based off this study. That was just bringing in data that we had brought in from the county, and so that was showing, I guess, existing thread trail. But to clarify, nothing is being recommended to change with the thread trail within the study.
So you need to go speak to the county, Candace. Other questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Westlake.
First of all, thank you for asking the question about Marvin, because that was something I wanted to bring up. Make sure that Waxhaw taxpayers aren't paying for roads in the Marvin Town District. A couple of things I wanted to ask just from engineering perspective. So we've talked in the past about some STP projects using the vehicle tax fee for smaller projects. So with the Pine Oak intersection, you had an amount of $400,000 there. Is that something that we can, from an engineering standpoint, do even if we're not doing that widening on Waxhaw Marvin, at least doing the straightening the intersection? So
Yes.
that is something we could do without doing the whole project. And then as far as the Kensington intersection, so the $4 million is that taking out, or is that including what Landover is? No. So
No,
that would
that's
be
in addition. Right.
And so, and they are supposed to be doing that project, is it this year or next year?
It's this year.
This year.
They're going to hopefully break ground as soon as possible.
Okay, so from an engineering standpoint, again, can you just clarify, you're saying, or this is recommending some additional lanes. So is that a good time to be doing it? Is it something that later on that could be extended, or?
Yeah, I think this is a phase 2. That
Okay.
it's not imminent now. I think the initial improvements underway are certainly going to relieve the current issues, but when we project those future volumes, that intersection is going to continue to be key because of all the directions that it serves.
So at least that first part will be done this year.
And just a clarification question on that. Didn't we, when we pushed it back 6 months, we did that with an eye towards the mast arms?
Oh, absolutely. They will end up being
accounting for this.
All right, they will be in the proper location so that these improvements won't have to redo the most expensive piece of the signal.
And another clarification question. No analysis was done going Kensington down towards South Carolina, correct?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Is
going,
that
going west of,
west to South
West.
Carolina? That's become a, when we did the 16 study, we found out that that corridor from Newtown all the way down to the South Carolina border was one of the most heavily traveled roads, nearly as heavy as 16 at the.
what's very interesting about that is the analysis we did, like I said, for the Kensington-Cuthbertson 16 intersection, which included this intersection. We picked up counts back in 2015.
Yep.
And we looked at some future potential improvements to this intersection. Well, that changed when we picked up 2018 counts and re-looked at it. So what we saw was there was more traffic coming to and from the west from South Carolina. And so where the dual lanes we're recommending actually changed on approaches. And it was, now we really need them. Partially, you could tell, is kind of going to the school. People are going that way and then coming back out. You could tell a lot more traffic just in the past 3 years has migrated towards that direction.
Good. Any additional questions?
With the Kensington study, as he just said, going towards South, Mayor Maher just said, going towards South Carolina, that can be or possibly included, since this is just a projection, because if you look at Kensington, even past the school itself, there are some changes that are being made or growth projections that are being made in that area that could increase your counts, your numbers with the traffic as well. So is that something that can be accounted for, you know, if that does come up, since this is just, you know, as you said, a projection or guidance model that you're using? Would you look at that again?
Yeah, I'm not sure specifically if you're talking about some of the Millbridge.
Right in the
Development that'll be up
Millbridge
there.
area.
So that was
There's
accounted
more
for.
housing over there. There's more development over there. There's growth with sales and even, you know, possible more communities that are shooting up in that area. That's going to increase the traffic flow.
Yeah, so I think that even points to even more of a reason why, you know, we're showing specifically dual lefts coming from Kensington heading up on Waxhaw Marvin, so that would accommodate that additional traffic coming off of Kensington from that direction. But if some new stuff pops up, we can always take this and then add that, and it's a whole lot easier than to update analysis based off of new stuff like that once we have this data.
And we never factored in the future plan of Prescott Glen Parkway and the bridge and possibly connecting to Pine Oak and all that stuff that.
That was factored in, yes.
Yeah, that was factored in.
That was.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Commissioner Burrow.
Again, excuse me, just as a clarification, the study just takes into consideration the Kensington-Waxhaw-Marvin intersection. You have a project pending from Cuthbertson up Kensington to that intersection. It's completely separate from that. And what we're talking about going past the intersection to the South Carolina line, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part of that study that's going on now. Am I wrong?
Well, in general, if
Just in North Carolina.
anything that's happening within our jurisdiction will be subject to the TIA, and so they'll have to do their own analysis, and certainly this information will be available to be included and kind of program too. And in general, when we start looking at that intersection, there's not much more you can do in a conventional sense if you want to really accommodate the volumes that maybe we're looking at growing past. And so, again, it gets into a whole other kind of realm of modeling. And so for our intent and purpose, this is, I think, enough to chew on. But certainly things are going to grow and change, but we've got something at least that's on the books and has data that can be referenced.
You did a great job. No question. I wasn't clear on what I was getting at, and I apologize for that. Kensington from Waxhaw Marvin to the South Carolina border is a state road, and that's why I brought it up. That's not included in the Kensington project. You did pick up part of it from the intersection study coming west and going west. Yep. So you caught that part, but that would be a future state project if indeed the volume warranted it.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to provide clarity. What do we want to do with it?
Make a motion, we approve it.
So we have a motion to approve or adopt the document as a guidance for making decisions for future of travel along the Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor and for development implications in the area as well. So motion on the table. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody for the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, general public comments. Dr. Edwin Elam, 524 Miller Drive.
To the Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, to the two commissioners who I can address, to the town clerk, to the town manager, to Attorney Charles R. Buckley III, to the town...
Just as a point of clarity, you can address all commissioners. You're addressing the town board as a body. Okay?
and Chief Ice. Timeline. It dawned on me that there were 4 people here at the dais that I can address who were not here in 2016 and may not have all the facts on this serious matter at hand. For you, I have prepared a timeline document to help those that were not here to understand and see this travesty for what it is. I also do not want to cast any doubt on the accounting department of the town of Waxhaw, since there is real talent there, and I am hoping that no one has been asked to change the practice of labeling the expenses properly that made this necessary for what we've uncovered as a citizen, as a taxpayer, and as a member of the press. In the movie A Few Good Men, the reason Corporal Dawson and the soldier under his command were dishonorably discharged was because they were both derelict in their duty and in their oath to stand up for the least among them under the Constitution and under the military code. In the movie, it was Santiago. At the June 8, 2018 meeting, right here, I stood up for Commissioner Brenda McMillan when it was floated in this town by certain diabolical operatives that the only reason Commissioner Brenda McMillan was asking questions about the East Side was because she was black. And that was a lie, and everyone knows it. She is a decent human being and who was and is doing her job. In fact, the only place documents I will refer to later have not worked is also right here in the Waxhaw chamber, when you allowed an abomination from the dais on Tuesday, August 28, 2018. You see, I now know that the Founding Fathers did graft people in like me, a person standing up for the causes of justice, equality, and decency, a man of honor, a citizen and a taxpayer, and a member of the press. I am one of the few men that has enjoyed the meaning of the documents that shape this nation, the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution, the documents I referred to earlier. Great legal minds have all been thinking that they left us out, but they didn't. I have been standing on those rights, and it dawned on me, when you know who all they were and what they had done in their private lives, they kept their bills separate. They knew that my family would one day serve in the White House, and my baby brother, a top Army soldier, has.
3 minutes.
My family serves, as I close, serves as a schoolhouse.
Please wrap.
All right, and, well, just maybe we've learned here that certain persons cannot handle the truth. So what I wanted to do is leave this with melody for those individuals whose names, and it is quite interesting that when we take
Please,
we have the 3 minutes, but others who don't look like us get more minutes.
No. All right, everybody. Let's calm it down.
That's true.
Let's calm it down. Okay. Reports from town leadership. Manager Fergus, why don't we go light first?
I got a couple, so if Matt can load those up. update on a couple park and recreation items, and I'll move through these. Dina was going to do this tonight, but had a family emergency, so she's taking care of that. Project has been completed, and that's the skate park upgrade. There's not only landscaping enhancements, but a canopy and 2 canopy enhancements that are done, and that was a grant-funded project, if you remember, and it had to be completed by the end of the calendar year. And what I want to do is acknowledge some extremely hard work under a lot of very tough weather conditions in the month of December, including people being out there the very last day of the year to make sure that project got done so that it could be completed and turned into the state, documented, and then see that grant be funded completely. Harvey Nesbitt Park, this is our restroom facility that's there, but it's not just a restroom, it's got a concession area and a storage area, and it fits in well with what the park looks like currently, and then our brand and what the town represents. This is pretty close to being done. We're at the point of water and sewer hookups and electrical hookups and the final little stages there that need to be done. There's a couple Eagle Scout projects that have gone on in conjunction with that include some of the outside work there. And then Lowe's is out doing some work there in another area as well. I'm sorry, and Town Creek has got the Lowe's folks actually volunteering.
That's who was out there today. I didn't recognize any of them. I thought, who did we just hire?
Yeah, Town Creek had Lowe's volunteers on site today.
Cool.
They're planting shrubbery today and doing some work there. I was reading part of that with the Nesbitt Park, but Town Creek is 99% done. There was actually an inspector going out to look at some items there. The landscaping enhancements were being done today, and then that is the 2 scout projects as well. We're going to schedule some special event notification on these when they're ready to do kind of a final ribbon cutting, but these are 2 significant projects that are done. We just had to contend with rough weather toward the end. Park Master Plan.
Just a point, and Greg and I were talking about this earlier today, just to alleviate any concern in the community. One of the things that the town staff does once they go through and finish a project like this is they pass that information on to our insurance carriers, and they go through it and make sure it's safe and sound and all that stuff. So be assured that the town staff is doing all the things that they have to do to make sure that we're covered, everything's safe, et cetera, and I just wanted to bring that up.
So the Park and Rec Master Plan, getting toward the end of a draft, and that will be sent out to the Board of Commissioners and the Park and Rec Commission for a work session, and they'll be coming back to the town commissioners for final approval. That's been very well participated in by a number of citizens in the town. So these are upcoming events, number of senior coffees there, which are well received. And then we've got some additional youth and adult and teen programs that will be announced. Those announcements have not started yet. You may see some affiliate activities. Sometimes there's activities in the community that we try to help publicize, but they're not put on by the town, and they're not a direct park and rec activity, but they might have to do with health and wellness or financial well-being, a lot of things that are just good programs that we may try to help encourage people to take a look at. Doesn't mean we endorse those, but they might be on our Facebook page or someplace else. And then the last item there is we have some new banners going up downtown, and which should start going up probably tomorrow. So if you see those, they'll be coming soon. And then we have a second set of items just that are kind of general that have to do with some things that are going on in public services. Leaf vacuuming goes through January 31st, so wet weather again has been challenging, but they've been on it. We had equipment went out of commission for a little bit, but they got it back in place and got it working, and they're moving right around. Christmas trees that are real Christmas trees we pick up. If you put your artificial tree with lights, stencil, and ornaments on that, that is not which you're supposed to do, but we've had that occur. And we had some theories as to how that occurred, but don't do that. So, potholes in town, again, weather related, and that's a little bit of a theme tonight, is we realize and are hearing that there are potholes all over town and really all over Union County, and someone was telling the story today that they'd been in the beach and back, and it's not just in Union County or Charlotte or metro area, it's all over the state. DOT has a large majority of those issues on their roads. If you know it's a state road, feel free to call it into the DOT. We do have a website form. If you report it to us and it's not a town road, we will call it in the DOT, but understand that we are not going to go out and be able to fill that pothole on a state road. We will get right on the ones that are town roads and address those as quickly as possible. A couple factors that play into that, though, certainly weather, the large number that are all over state roads, and then whether or not asphalt plants are actually operational during the winter months, all play factors into how quickly the NCDOT can get to those. We have been in contact with NCDOT staff, and they acknowledge that they're behind, but they're working on the list, so it happens, and you can't staff up year-round for the pothole season, so these folks are transitioning from other things and working on what they can work on.
They're also working through the hurricane aftermath. I mean, big time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Waxhaw 101 is back, and so we're here for the second year of that citizen educational program, and so we're looking forward to that. It's 8 weeks, and an opportunity to learn about the town, how it's organized under North Carolina state law, the services that we perform and provide, and it's really a way to get to know a lot about your hometown and get to know some other members of the community that are interested in learning more. We've got a few spots left. The applications are still available, and there is a tiered system, so if you're a town resident, you get first shot, and then a town business owner, you get second shot, and then if there's anything left as far as spots, we'll look to see if we have applicants for those. But I think we're getting close to the full number, but we probably have a couple spots open if there's interest in the community. These are on Wednesday evening from 6 to 8, roughly 2 hours. We might have an evening or so that go to 8:30. We do a tour, and we do ask that the residents that commit to it make all of the sessions, because it's really important to be there and hear the full explanation and the questions that are asked as you learn. That's where the form is. It's on the website, and we encourage folks to get one of those, or you can get one at town. You can get a paper copy at Town Hall if you don't have access to the website or to a printer. So we have those. And that's all I had tonight.
Any questions for the manager? Commissioner Burrow? Commissioner Westlake? Mayor Pro Tem?
Say, belated as it is, though, a Happy New Year to all who are here, and to the town residents of Waxhaw. We are looking forward to a very productive year here in the town of Waxhaw, with hopefully many good things to come, be it through Parks and Rec, be it through our roadways, be it through our downtown area. And we just invite everyone to join us, send us questions, comments, and participate in the activities and all the events that we have for the year. And we're glad to see everyone here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee?
I do, but I'd prefer to speak after you.
Okay. Commissioner? You'll wait? Okay, well then everybody will get a chance to speak after me then, I guess. So I got a couple of items to bring up. So first of all, where did the public comments slide go? Public input comments go? Matt, if you could bring those back up. Yeah, I just want to highlight, we've had these public comment rules and directions in place since 2015. And anybody that wishes to speak longer than 3 minutes has full opportunity to put it in a request to the clerk and get scheduled time and do it under the report. And so that offer has been out there since 2015, I believe. And we will continue to abide that. We follow the same procedure and process that the municipalities in the region and across the state follow, as well as the county. So pretty comfortable with that, and I'm pretty comfortable that it's fair and equitable. 2 items to report on. Town of Waxhaw has been asked to respond to a concern raised regarding legal expenditures the town incurred. Consulted with, and the email came to me, as well as the town attorney, as well as it was communicated in other mediums. I consulted with both the former and the current interim town attorney to make sure we had the facts, as well as the town clerk, and thought I would do a report, and then we will go ahead and put this out there. These expenditures were incurred in 2017 and associated with complaints followed by Dr. Elam. The specific concern alleges that of legal expenditures alleges the town of Waxhaw is expending public money for legal advice that is alleged to be associated with a private matter between an individual and 2 sitting commissioners. As an aside, I've reviewed this with all of the commissioners prior to this, so there's no surprises in what's being read or if there were any questions. Simple answer is the town of Waxhaw has not expended any public dollars for use as legal fees in a private matter. The following timeline applies to the situations alleged, a period of time from 2016 to 2018 where the town of Waxhaw has received and processed nearly 700 emails from Dr. Elam. Prior to November 2016, the town of Waxhaw received a formal complaint from Dr. Elam against the town commissioner. The complaint was appropriately handled procedurally and administered by our town attorney and town manager. The original complaint in 2016 was determined to be a private matter and was communicated via written correspondence to Dr. Elam in November 2016. The commissioner was at that time Commissioner Stewart, was her name at that time. In spring of 2017, the volume, nature, and types of new complaints to the town of Waxhaw by Dr. Elam significantly increased. The allegations were directed at the town of Waxhaw, its various departments, its staff, its ordinances, as well as a specific commissioner, and a commissioner also claimed harassment. The then town attorney suggested the town of Waxhaw engage outside counsel to thoroughly examine the complete situation objectively and holistically. The Board of Commissioners at that time directed the usage of outside attorney. The town of Waxhaw engaged Parker Poe, and the stated purpose in the engagement letter was, quote, Parker Poe will perform legal services as counsel to the town of Waxhaw in the matter related to citizen harassment of a town commissioner and related claims against the town or its officials. The engagement of Parker Poe occurred between July 2017 and year-end and prior to the swearing-in of commissioners in alphabetical order, Lee, McMillan, and Westlake, in December 2017. Parker Poe shared no findings against the town of Waxhaw, its policies and practices, its officials, nor its employees. Parker Poe did attempt to resolve individual disputes between Dr. Elam and the town. In spring 2018, the number of complaints to the town of Waxhaw again began to increase. The town attorney and town manager have and continue to examine the complaints. Any allegation directed to the town of Waxhaw political figures and not town governments were and will continue to be deemed personal in nature. The town of Waxhaw has no official involvement in those matters and no official comment on those matters. Any and all complaints and allegations related to the government business of the town of Waxhaw have been and will continue to be reviewed and processed consistently via our town processes and ordinances. Any questions? Okay. Now, how about some good news? Town of Waxhaw and the YMCA of Greater Charlotte have recently discussed the status of the Waxhaw YMCA project. The conversation was valuable as it put into context the market and project pressures Waxhaw and the YMCA has had to deal with, as well as to provide clarity on the project. And I've individually discussed this with each of the board members. The meeting that the Y had was with Greg and myself in early December, or middle December. As to the YMCA Waxhaw project, that's what they're calling it. The YMCA commits to the completion of the original initial improvements of no later than December 2022. That's about 9 months later. but they've committed to it. Future facility expansion is now linked directly to Waxhaw's growth, our demographics and their dynamics, and the YMCA partnership potential. The YMCA has removed fundraising as a contingency on initial improvement completion. While this does not minimize the need for fundraising, the essence is the YMCA is assuming responsibility for the costs. To reinforce a more aggressive movement forward, the YMCA will create the YMCA Waxhaw Advisory Board, which would have similar purposes to advisory boards that are in existence for every YMCA. This board will be in place no later than the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2019. The conceptual architectural drawings and related plans will be submitted and approved a year from then, no later than June 30th, 2020. Joint programming has always been an intent of the Waxhaw YMCA partnership. This programming can leverage the capability of the Y and is not contingent upon the site improvements. In that vein, both Waxhaw and YMCA will begin immediate exploration and the potential for implementation of joint programming to meet our operational goals and to better serve the Waxhaw region. And with that, we've given this to our respective staffs to work out the little details for these tweaks, but it's a very positive statement on behalf of both of us to put clarity around this and move the ball forward. I know there's been a lot of noise out in the community, and the YMCA approached us and said we need to clear this up and provide some clarity. So with that, we made some progress on that. So I guess I'll go around the table again. Any comments? Okay, now wait a minute, guys. We're not all going to wait for everybody else to speak.
I'm happy to speak now.
Go ahead.
Okay. Given the severity of the accusations being spread by Edwin Elam have forced the town to make an official statement tonight refuting his claims, I feel I should offer any additional clarity I can on this matter. Among his false accusations that you have already heard about from our mayor, he has demanded to know, quote, who paid the invoice bill concerning the attorney fees for recent unnecessary arbitration. The arbitration he is referring to, I am assuming, is when I was finally forced to avail myself of my constitutionally protected rights.
We need to be careful. We need to be careful here. We only talk town business here, and we need to be very careful. And that was one of the procedural changes we made. In answer to the specific question, all invoices are paid through the finance office, by the finance manager, and approved by the town manager. And so all legal fees associated with any current claims and anything pushed towards the town were addressed in this response. So I just want to be clear on that.
Yes, I'm just there. If he is referring to my taking him to court for cyber stalking, harassment, and threats against my life,
you got to be careful. We can't go into that. That is not town business.
Then let me say that was paid for privately by myself.
If you have a claim, if you have a complaint going on with Dr. Elam, that's between you guys, and
it was paid
has nothing to do with
by
the town.
Myself, not by the town in any way.
Nothing to do by the town. I don't know anything about it. Commissioner Burns?
As I stated in the last two times that I've discussed this issue, I will defend myself, and this is not a town issue. This is a private issue paid for by me out of my own funds, and I will continue to defend myself and handle this in the court of law. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrow, you want to go again? All right. Well, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. All those in favor?